You are listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I am your host, Celine Yeager. Each week, I bring you advice from athletes, scientists, researchers, and other experts to help you feel and perform your best, no matter what your hormones are doing. This show is a production of Live Feisty Media. Hello, strong, feisty women. I have such a treat for you this week. I had the pleasure of sitting down with ultra-endurance swimmer Sarah Thomas. And if you don't know who Sarah Thomas is, I will contend that it's because she is far too freaking humble, because this woman should be a household name, in my opinion. In Sarah Thomas's 40 years on this planet, she has endured chemo, radiation, and surgery for aggressive breast cancer, a traumatic ectopic pregnancy, and the challenges of cancer-related medical menopause. She has also smashed the preconceived notions of what is possible in the water, becoming the first person to complete a 4-way crossing of the English Channel in 54 hours and 10 minutes, just 1 year after completing her cancer treatments. Most recently, Sarah has become the first person in history to complete a 2-way crossing of the North Channel in 21 hours and 46 minutes in freezing water, peppered by giant jellyfish. She holds the record also for being the first person to swim Lake Champlain, which, if you don't know, that covers 104.6 miles, and she did that in just over 67 hours. I could go on and on and on, but I will let her tell you about it in the show. I just want to say, Sarah, you are a rock star, and I am blown away by what you do. Her next goal, for those who are interested, is she wants to complete the 2 swims that she has left in the Ocean's Sevens Challenge, which comprises 7 long-distance open water swims across the most dangerous sea channels in the world. Sarah writes beautifully about her swimming and the challenges that she has faced in her life at her website, sarahthomaszswims.com. I will link that in the show notes. I encourage you to check it and her out. All right. Before we get to it, please remember to sign up for my free weekly blog at feistymenopause.com, where I distill all the latest research and what it means to you. Follow us at Feisty Menopause on Instagram and Facebook. Come on in and join our private and still growing Hit Play Not Pause Facebook group. If you like what you're hearing here and you want a deeper dive into all things training and nutrition and mindset, we have a membership as well. And you can learn about our Level Up membership, that's what it's called, at feistymenopause.com. Finally, very quick thanks to Amino Co. for their support of this show. I have been drinking a bottle with a scoop of Amino Co.'s Perform product to put some amino acids in my system before my triathlon training sessions, and I love the mental focus and energy it gives me. And sometimes when there's a super hard session on tap, I'll toss a bit of beta-alanine in that bottle as well, and I feel absolutely bionic. So thanks, Amino Co., for your support. All right, enough of me. Let's have a few words about our awesome sponsors and get on with the show. Okay, Sarah, I'm very excited that you are here. I'm glad somebody recommended you on Instagram, and they're like, you should talk to this woman. I was like, you are correct. I should definitely talk to this woman. Because your story, which we'll get into here, is, it's a bit unique, but it's not out of the ordinary necessarily. There's a lot of women in our audience who sort of have faced the same challenges, and I'm just glad you're here. So thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to chat.
All right. Well, before we start, I want to go in and learn a bit more about your incredible talent for distance swimming, because I always wonder when I hear about people like you, I'm like, how did you discover that you can do this?
Yeah, it was totally 100% an accident. My mom had me basically in swim lessons before I could walk. So just grew up in the water, on the water, loving the water. By the time I was 7, I was just begging desperately to be on a swim team, and just swam competitively in the pool through high school, through college. I walked onto the University of Connecticut swim team, And I was just a super duper average pool swimmer, but I just loved it. So kind of stuck with it. When I moved to Denver for grad school, I joined a master's team. And some of my new teammates just started like almost immediately telling me like, hey, you would be so good in open water swimming. And I grew up in Texas and like Oklahoma, where, like, that's not really a thing. Like the lakes there are not delightful. And so it had just like never even crossed my mind to even try open water swimming. So it took some nudging. They talked me into doing a 10K open water race here outside of Denver in Fort Collins. And I just loved it. It was just like one of those moments of like, oh, this is what I should have been doing all along. And I did. I loved that 10K distance, which at the time was super intimidating and super scary. And I thought no one
sounds
could
that way to me
possibly,
still.
yeah, I was like, no one can possibly swim 10K 6 miles without stopping. Like that's out of this world. And I did it and I loved it and it wasn't terrible. And it kind of in the swim community, I started meeting people who had done things like the English Channel.
Wow.
And it had never occurred to me that you would like meet people in the world who had swum the English Channel. And it just kind of inspired me to maybe, hey, well, if they can do it, maybe I can try it. And I tried it and loved it and just kind of kept it going, always with this drive to like see how far I could push myself, see what I could accomplish in the water, and just really purely driven out of a passion for the water and just being in the water.
And then in 2017, I read that you performed a record-breaking swim in Lake Champlain. And for those of us who are like, this is not our world at all, and I'm going to guess it's a
Right.
lot of us, like myself.
Most people, yeah.
Yeah. Can you explain like what you did there?
Yeah, sure. So kind of as I'm going along, I swam the English Channel in 2012.
Oh,
and
okay.
I got,
yeah, I missed that.
Yeah,
Right.
no, yeah. So I swam just English Channel in 2012. I got to France and I like remember standing in France and like looking back and saying, I could swim back right now. And that's not a normal thing. People don't normally get to France and be like, that wasn't too hard.
And how far is that for those of us
It's
who
about,
don't know?
yeah, the English Channel is about 20 miles, 21 miles, kind of depending on how the current pulls you. And so kind of starting in 2012, I was like, I got to do more. So like I started doing like, I did a 40-mile swim and a 50-mile swim in 2013. And they just kind of built it. I did an 80-mile swim in 2016. And these are distances that people don't do, right? Most people like that 20-mile distance is really, really far. And so when I'm breaking into that like 50-mile range, there's only like 10 people in history who have swum more than 50 miles all at once. And this is without stopping, no wetsuit, you're just
No
you're
wetsuit.
Going. No wetsuit. Yeah, just regular old like swimsuit, cap, goggles. That's all you get.
And do you have a kayak following you, feeding you?
Yeah, you've got either a boat or a kayak, depends on the distance of the swim, sometimes both if it's a really long one. And so just, over the years, that first 10K was in 2007. So kind of between 2007 and 2017, I'm just going longer and farther and kind of pushing the limits and kind of seeing what is possible. And so in 2017, to get back to your question.
How long, before we get there, how long does an 80-mile swim take you?
Really long. So that was the 80-mile swim I did in 2016 in Lake Powell. It took me 56 hours.
Wow.
So like nonstop swimming for 56 hours.
And you're not napping in the water,
No, right? Yeah. No, I like tried,
God.
I like researched like, okay, what happens when you stay awake for this many days? And is it possible to stay awake? And there's studies on like micro sleeps where you can just like briefly fall asleep for a few seconds. So I'm like, well, maybe during the night I can like get into my rhythm and I'm swimming and maybe I can like fall asleep for like a minute and that will be refreshing. And that doesn't happen. I tried really hard.
Are you hallucinating? I mean, you hear about ultra runners like seeing stuff. Are you seeing like narwhals and like
right?
what are you seeing?
That's what so one of the things that I'm researching for Lake Powell, I was like, I found ultra running and I'm like, oh my gosh, these are my people. And so I'm reading about all of their hallucinations. And so I was kind of like excited, like I'm going to hallucinate. This might actually be fun. And I I have never once
Mm,
hallucinated.
I'm
And
sorry.
it's like really disappointing. I know. I was like really kind of looking forward to it. I'm like, what am I going to see? What's my imagination going to bring to me? And there was like nothing, just torture.
Where does your mind go?
Yeah, it goes everywhere, you know, like if you
Wow.
just, I don't know, in the middle of Lake Champlain, I remember I was like swimming and I'm like, I forgot to email Kim. So, you know, like you're thinking about work, you're thinking about life, you know,
Yeah, I get it.
you're just in the zone. You know, my favorite is when you're just kind of in that just like meditative,
Hmm.
quiet space where you're not worried about anything. All you're doing is swimming. You know, I stop every 30 minutes for feed my boat, and
Okay.
my crew, they throw me a bottle. So I like chug. And so we
Right.
do that every 30 minutes. So I'm stopping for like 30 seconds
Yeah,
every half an hour. And so like at some point, those 30 minutes start to go by really fast.
I
And
bet.
then you just kind of lose track of all time and being, and it's kind of nice. You know, I enjoy that part of it.
Wow.
It's when you're like stuck in the waves and getting sick to your stomach and all of that stuff. That part is not so much
Not
fun.
fun.
No,
All right,
definitely
so
not.
let's go. Now we're in August
Yeah.
2017. I've
Yes.
got the stage. And what
Yes.
is Lake Champlain?
Yeah. So Lake Champlain is a lake. It's a gigantic lake, kind of on the border of New York and Vermont. Kind of goes up into Canada for people who
Mhm.
are not familiar with that part of the U.S. And it's this long, narrow lake. And you know, the year before, I had gone 80 miles, and I said, you know what, I can go more. You know, I got out, I did like a little jump at the end of Lake Powell, and I was like, there's more left in the tank here. And so we went to Lake Champlain so that I could try and break the 100-mile mark, which had never been done. No one has swum that far without the assistance of a current. And so went to Lake Champlain in August of 2017, did kind of an out and back loop, started pretty far north in the lake, kind of almost in Canada, swam down about 50 miles, turned around and came back. And I ended up at 104 point or 105.6 or something. I always forget the numbers. It's really terrible. But I swam for 67 hours straight. That part I definitely remember. And it was a really long couple of days. And there was nothing left in the tank when I finished Lake Champlain, that's for sure.
Because that's days. I mean, that's literally
Yeah.
seeing the
Yeah.
sun come up and set. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. We started at 8 in the morning on a Monday. Um, you know, and so I talk to people, and sometimes I get in my mind, I get it like mixed up. But yeah, like I watched the sun go down 3 times.
wow,
You know what I mean? Like there was 3 sunsets that
that's
I swam through.
crazy.
Hmm.
I mean, I've done 24-hour mountain bike racing, and like, I can't even wrap my head around
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's a really long way, super long way.
Yeah.
um, and it's, you know, it's filled with so many emotions, right? There was um, on the start of the third day, like I was just spent. You know, I've been awake for 48 hours, and I just started to sob. You know, and it's like
Not
I don't
surprisingly,
even, you know, and I'm like, why am I crying right now? Like I'm
because
fine.
you need sleep.
Yeah, but I am like hysterically sobbing, like stopping and emptying my goggles out, and I'm
Oh,
like, this is fine, like I'm okay, but I'm just really sad. And it's fine, you know, like you push through it. My team was, you know, they're used to seeing me cry, and they're like, it's fine, you're okay, you're doing great, good job. But you know, it's hard because you're like, why am I like, what's happening to me right now?
yeah. Wow. Wow. I mean, just wow. Okay. So, which actually, I mean, all of this makes the next thing that we're pivoting to, in my mind, all the more jarring, because
Yeah,
it wasn't that long after this incredible feat
right,
that your life took what I can only imagine was this most blindsiding turn, right? And you were
right,
diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer at
right.
35. Like,
Yeah.
did you have any inkling anything was wrong?
Mm-mm. No, not one tiny inkling. So Lake Champlain was in August. In late October, I found a lump in my breast. So I just found it on my own. Took me forever to get into the doctor. I think I had to wait like 4, 5, 6 weeks or something just to get in to see my doctor. And I was just, you know, like in denial. Like it's a cyst. You know, there's no family history of cancer in my family at all. You know, like there's no breast cancer, no, like, you know, we're healthy Midwesterners, you know, like, and so it didn't even occur to me that I should be worried about it. I'm like, I should probably go get this checked out, but like, I'm sure it's just a cyst. It didn't hurt, but like, it wasn't going away. So went in to just see my primary care doctor, and she poked around on it, and she was like, you should go get a mammogram, and
Mm,
like, do not delay. She's like, I'm going to refer you. She's like, they've got 3 locations. They're not going to have an opening at the place closest to you. Take their first available appointment. And I was like, uh-oh, like,
right.
this is serious.
Not
Like,
what I wanted to hear.
yeah, like, she's scared. And so I went in for my mammogram. They took me straight back and did an ultrasound. The doctor came in, and she was like, been doing this for 30 years. She's like, we're going to wait for this biopsy to come back, but I can tell you by looking at it, this is scary, and this is, you probably have breast cancer. And again, I was 35 years old. 2 weeks ago, I thought, oh, maybe I just have a cyst. And it spins your life around, because I was totally healthy, no inkling whatsoever that something could possibly be wrong. I had just completed like my greatest athletic feat that I could ever have possibly imagined. I had
In the
other big
world. I mean, it's
swims.
not
Yeah,
just you.
like, yes. And then, I had other plans, I wasn't done by any means. And so it stops you, and it's gut wrenching, and it's horrible, and your entire life just changes like almost instantaneously. And it's not really a good time.
Yeah. Well, so then what happened? Like, what was the course? I mean, you had, I
Yeah.
know, chemo and radiation. Like, what did that
Mm-hmm.
look like? And
Sure.
were you able to continue doing this sport you love during all of
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. So I was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer, which means it was hormone negative across the board,
Okay.
which has some pros and cons to it, but it's super aggressive, with a super high risk of reoccurrence, especially within the first 5 years. And so when you have triple negative, they do things in like a little bit different order. So if people are familiar with breast cancer treatment, normally you start with surgery, but I started with chemo. So I did 16 rounds of chemo over, I think, we started in December, right before Christmas, and then finished at the beginning of May. So I did my 16 rounds of chemo, and then I did a mastectomy. And then I got to follow that up with 25 rounds of radiation. So it was kind of about 9 months total of treatment from when we started chemo until radiation finished. And I swam pretty well through most of it. I was pretty active, especially during chemo. My doctor really encouraged me to do whatever felt good. She said, gone are the days where, we want you just to lay around and rest.
Right.
She said, rest if you feel like you need to, don't push anything, but exercise will do nothing but help you. And so I swam about as much as I could during chemo, probably like 3-4 days a week
Okay.
swimming. It was my routine to always swim the day of chemo. So the chemo on Thursdays. And so I'm like, I'm going to get up in the morning at 5 o'clock, and I'm going to go to the pool because I'm going to feel like crap for the next few days.
Yeah.
So definitely had a nice routine during chemo. Struggled after my mastectomy. I had to be out for 8 weeks. And I did battle with my surgeon as to how soon I could go back in the water, because I was going crazy. My goal was to make him laugh every time I went in, because he's a very serious perfectionist type of a man. And so going in, I'm like, all right, I'm going to make this guy laugh, and I'm going to get cleared to swim sooner rather than later. But he held firm. So that was probably the hardest part for me, was that 8 weeks when I just wasn't allowed to be in the water. And then during radiation, they also encouraged me to swim, but at some point I burned so badly. They were like, yeah, you probably shouldn't be in the water right now, because I was oozing and open sores and all kinds of stuff like that. So, so I kept out of the water for a little bit during radiation. But I will say I was pretty motivated. So that first 10K that I mentioned, it's in September of every year. And so kind of at the start of all of it, I'm like, I want to be ready to swim Horsetooth again. Like, I like, no matter what happens, I want to be able to swim Horsetooth. And so it was about 2.5 weeks after radiation that Horsetooth was scheduled. And the race director is a friend after all of these years. And so he knew I wanted to do it, and he held a spot open for me because they sell out. And I just remember kind of like the days leading up to it. He's like, can you swim? Can you swim? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm cleared for open water yet. And so on Friday, I went to see my surgeon, and he looked at my wounds and he's like, yeah, you can swim. And so
Oh,
I emailed Joe and I'm like, Joe, I'm coming. I'll be there. Like, I can't wait. And so 2.5 weeks after radiation, I did this 10K, and it was slow. Like, it was probably my slowest time. But it was just me and my husband in the kayak. And it was like this moment of like, I did it, like I'm done with this treatment. I can move on. I won. And I'm back to doing what I love.
right. And so then where does your medical induced menopause come in? Because I mean, you
Yeah.
which I'll put a link to it in the show notes. You did this
Yep.
beautiful essay sort of on this part of this journey. So
Yep.
where does that sort of slide into your life?
Right. So during chemo, so I think it was, I was okay. I'm trying to think. It was probably 2 weeks into chemo, roughly, that my periods stopped.
Okay.
And my oncologist had told me that this would happen. We were prepared for it. She was very open as to what would happen, kind of looking at the research at 35. I was on the borderline of if my periods would come back or not come back. We didn't know what was going to happen. But we had super honest conversation about what that was going to look like, what that might do to my fertility. Like, she was wonderful at discussing all of that with me. So I was prepared. I'd say during chemo, particularly, I had the most horrific hot flashes and night sweats. And I remember thinking, I'm so glad I'm bald right now, because like, I could just pull my hat off and just like sweat it out. And I was like, okay, this is one thing to be grateful for right now. But it was hard. It just, I don't know, you're in the middle of all this cancer treatment and you're definitely not having periods. I remember before my mastectomy, they had to do a pregnancy test. And I was like, I am not pregnant. And my urine was too diluted, so they had to do a blood test. And I'm like,
wow.
this is just traumatic to me, because like we had hoped to maybe have kids, and like I haven't had a period in 9 months, and now we're like belaboring the fact that maybe I'm pregnant right now. So there's just kind of comes with it all these, I don't know, traumatic things that just kind of break you in ways that you're not even like expecting to be broken.
And how long did that induced menopause last?
It was about 9 months. So actually right before that swim, my period started.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was like, whoa, like I was not expecting it to come back. I hadn't had any like inkling that it was going to. I remember I called my husband and I'm like, my period started. And the man, he's this big, tough, like tattooed mechanic man. And he like started to cry on the phone. Like, I'm not even kidding. He's like, I'm so excited. That makes me so happy. And so, we're, kind of in that moment, we're like, okay, maybe things are going to go back to normal. Maybe we can talk about having kids again in the future. Like, maybe we bought some time here. And so like, it was a little bit of a relief after 9 months of like feeling tortured. But I will say, even after my period started back, like I was still having like moderate hot flashes and night sweat. So, like none of those symptoms like really truly ever went away. So like, my periods are back regularly, but like they're killing me. I'm on a super short cycle now. Like death comes every 25 days. Like this is not normal for me. And I'm going to the doctors and we're kind of loosely talking about it, but especially early on, the focus was like, well, your cancer's gone. Aren't you happy?
Right.
And that's the frustrating part is, kind of, it's been 5 years now since my diagnosis. And I would say probably in the last 2 to 3 years, stuff just like on my insides are not right. And I can feel them like slowly shifting. And every time I'm at a doctor, whether it's my primary care doctor, my oncologist, I'm saying the same things like, hey, my periods are super short. They're really painful. And they're like, well, maybe we could try like, a little bit of birth control, because you're triple negative. Maybe we can do birth control. And I'm like, well, I would like to maybe have a baby.
Yeah.
And so like, and that was the only option that was ever given to me. And then like, we don't really want to do birth control, but maybe that would help your periods. But no discussion as to like what might actually be happening to me, what my timeline might be like for having a baby. Like, do I need to rush this? Like, there's just never any openness or discussion or anything other than me kind of gradually starting to feel like I was maybe insane, that I'm experiencing all these things. And,
Yeah.
I'm screaming it, I feel like, to all of my medical providers, and it's just nothing. Like, okay, maybe let's treat a symptom here and there, but otherwise it's like, well, you had cancer. Congrats, you're alive.
So in the scheme of things, because I had read that you did get pregnant somewhere in here, correct?
Yeah,
When
I
did
did.
that happen?
Yep, I got pregnant in when was it? It was April of 2021.
Okay.
So about 2 years after, is that where we're at? 2, 3 years after all of my cancer treatment ended.
Yeah.
And we tried and tried and tried. I went to the OBGYN and had like my hormones tested, and they're like, yeah, your numbers are super low for, someone who's 30, 38, 39, but, like, you could, just keep trying, basically, is what we were told. And it took us, I don't remember, 6, 7, 8 months before I got pregnant. I had a couple of like false positives, which was really heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm.
And then did get pregnant, and I was just like, it's like ecstatic. I think I took 3 or 4 pregnancy tests. I'm like, it's happening. We're going to do this. And then not too long after, started having some spotting, some bleeding. And it took, it felt like it was this long thing. And the doctors don't entirely know what happened to me, but at some point I'm like, I'm having a miscarriage. And I was in the middle of like a long swim. I was doing like a stage race. It was like a 4-day swimming race. My husband was at home. I had gone just with a friend, basically. And I'm swimming, and I'm like, the day 1 of the race, I feel great. Day 2, I'm like, oh, my stomach is cramping, and like got out and like I can barely walk. Up all night with just cramps and bleeding, and thinking, well, women have miscarriages all the time. Like, it's, like, this is what's happening. And, I hadn't told anyone that I was pregnant yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just this very alone moment. I was kind of in a remote part of Arizona. I couldn't even really text my husband to let him know what was happening. And so it was a couple of days before I could kind of communicate to him. And then I got home, and kind of we were talking about it, and saying, like, this doesn't seem like a normal miscarriage. So went back to the OB, and they did like the most painful vaginal ultrasound that I've ever had in my life. And they're like, yep, looks like this is an ectopic pregnancy. And so we were able to treat it medically, which was really terrifying. They actually use a chemo drug. And
Oh,
so
boy.
it's like, the second I got like injected with this, it was like I could just feel my body like go into like cancer mode. And it was just it was trauma inducing in so many ways, because it was like my body failing me again. Like the doctors are telling me, like, be careful, don't move, you can rupture, and if you start heavy bleeding or feeling dizzy, you need to come to the emergency room and we'll have to operate. And, it's just all of this stuff. And it just brought back so many memories of cancer and just feeling like I was not in control of my choices and of my body. It was really hard on my husband to see me sick and feeling like I was fragile again. And so it was just this big moment for us. And, people are, I wrote about that too. So if anyone wants to read a really painful blog on losing a pregnancy, there's that out there as well. But people, were so kind and so encouraging and like sharing their stories with me. But, resoundingly, everyone was like, you have to keep trying. And I felt like we were not in a place emotionally where we could keep trying, because it really just broke us. I think we'd been through COVID. COVID was still kind of happening, and hadn't really
about that.
processed. You know what I mean? It was just this horrible moment in time, and so we didn't try for a long time. And then it was kind of after that pregnancy where some of my like menopause, perimenopause symptoms really started to come and get me.
What was happening at that point?
Yeah, so I started getting like really terrible UTIs. I'm trying to think, just, again, like vaginal dryness, like not interested in sex. Really, again, the hot flashes are like back. I'm not sleeping. I am exhausted. Just like kind of, I don't know, this overarching just exhaustion and not sleeping. And I've never been a great sleeper. So again, I'm going to the doctors like, I'm not sleeping. And they're like, well, maybe you have sleep apnea. Well, you've had these UTIs. Maybe your body is just trying to fight off all these UTIs. And no one's really like, again, it's like the urologist is saying one thing, the OB is saying another, my primary care is saying another, my oncologist is saying another. And it's confusing. And it's
Are
like, where
any
do
of them
I even
saying
start?
menopause?
No, that word was never spoken to me. And so like I'm on the internet and I'm looking up like symptoms. I'm like, I know this is hormonal. Like they tested my thyroid's fine. And I'm like, this has to be hormonal. And so I'm looking up like symptoms of like estrogen, and I'm like, clearly I don't have any estrogen happening in my body here. And then I'm like looking up, I'm like, this is menopause. Like, here it is. Like this is what fits, and not a single doctor has said that to me. And even recently I'm at the doctor and I'm like, my hormones are whacked out. Like, what is there anything we can do? And my primary care doctor is just hesitant because of my breast cancer history, to tell me what I can and can't do. And her answer is talk to your oncologist. And so kind of in the last 2 years, my original oncologist has moved to Arizona. So I'm kind of without a really trusted oncologist. And so the person who has been filling in for her that I've been seeing in the meantime just is not helping. You know what I mean? Every single person I'm talking to and going to, they're compassionate and kind, and they want to stop my symptoms. They want me to feel better, but they're not truly giving me answers. And so about a month ago, I was like, you know what? I can change oncologists. So I was like, I don't have to keep coming here. I'm done with my active treatment. Like, it's not going to hurt anything to go and try and find a new oncologist who might actually listen to me. So I visited my primary care doctor. She actually, I pushed so hard. I was like, give me a list of things that you think I should ask my oncologist. So we came up with a list of questions. In the meantime, I'm reading Next Level, so I've got my own questions. And so I go to my oncologist, and it's been about 3 weeks at this point that I visited him. And I was like, hey, like, I think I'm in menopause. And he was like, well, yeah. And so we talked through my questions. And so, we're trying a couple of things to see what we can do. I will say so far, he started me on a couple of different supplements. Black cohosh is one of them.
Okay. Okay.
And
Is it
then
helping?
I think so. That's what I'm trying. I'm still in the phase of like, I can't decide if I think it's helping a ton or not. I think it's making my stomach a little upset. So, trying to work through maybe some of that, but I think I'm actually getting a little bit of relief as far as the sleeping stuff goes. The hot flashes are still, I just had one like 5 minutes ago. I'm like sweating over here. So I think I'm getting I think we're going to, the jury is still out, but I go back in another 2 weeks, and we'll reassess. And he said, I want to see you until we can help you start to feel better.
Oh, that's nice.
I know no one has said that to me. And so, he just was like, yeah, I can't believe no one's talked to you about this. He's sending me for a bone density scan, just to see what might have been happening or not happening there. He was surprised I hadn't had one done yet. So I kind of feel like I found this amazing human who actually like cares about my well-being beyond just like, hey, you survived cancer, good job, check.
Yeah, no kidding. So just like, because I actually don't know how common this is. So your periods did come back, but was it all the cancer treatment that sort of brought you into this early menopause?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's chemo very commonly. And I hear this horror story from women all the time whose oncologists did not talk to them about this, but chemo destroys your ovaries, it fries them. And so, some women, if you go, if you're getting chemo earlier on, your ovaries are young and can kind of bounce back and recover. But if you're kind of that 35 age was borderline, but if you're over the age of 35, there is a really solid chance that you will not regain like ovary function. You will not get periods. You'll be in menopause.
And they don't,
Um,
hormones are off the table.
yeah, it did. I mean, because I was triple negative and like so hormone negative, I had a little bit of options, but
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to do that for me, right? So like hormone replacement therapy, not an option for me. Would not be an option for most breast cancer survivors.
Right.
I'm not on tamoxifen, which is kind of nice in some ways because that messes with you as well. Um, so that's why I was kind of hoping, okay, I'm not on tamoxifen. Maybe everything will be normal. You know, I'll go through menopause at a normal time in life, but that was definitely not going to be my experience.
So how did you fall into, you had mentioned Next Level, and this is not an advertisement for it, but I'm
Yeah,
curious, like how,
yeah,
how you found it.
yeah. Um, so I coach a group of swimmers, just like open water swimmers. So a lot of them are remote, but they just it's not planned, but they just so happen to be mostly women in their 40s and 50s. And one of the swimmers that I coached recommended it. She was having some symptoms. Um, she had, I don't know how she had found it, but she found it and just said like, oh my gosh, there's so many concrete things in here that I feel like I can do. And so we kind of read it almost as a group. And then kind of at the same time, my swimmers and I were reading it. Some of my other women friends were also reading it. So I just felt like this summer, like everyone was reading Next Level. And I had to like kind of make my way through it slowly because some of it was kind of emotional for me to like
Mm.
read and like hear it and like see it in black and white. But it was eye opening and kind of what it has done for me over the last couple of months is it's given me like a feeling of like, okay, there are things I can try, right? Like it's not out of my control. Like when I was going through all my cancer treatments, like my body was not mine to own. I could not control what was happening to it. And I was feeling that same way with all of this perimenopause, menopause, like all of this. I was just feeling like, okay, well, this is what's going to happen to me now. I just have to be resigned to gaining weight and feeling tired all the time. And reading that book, I was like, I don't have to, right? There's things I can do to help my bone density. If it's, you know, if we get the scan back and it's bad, like I'm not like, this is not like a death sentence for me. And so, you know, just the tools about things to eat and not ways to exercise more, because that was my last doctor. She was like, just exercise more, Sarah. And I'm like, I swim 5 to 6 days a week for like 2 to 3 hours a day, you know, in the off season. Like, I don't need to exercise more, right? That's not the answer. But just, you know, having some tools of like, all right, do some stuff that's like super high intensity with a lot of recovery, lift some
Yeah.
weights, you
Yeah.
know, like just having tools of things I can try that maybe they're not all the answer. And, you know, I'm still trying to work through what's going to work and not work, but like having tools and options and like something I can refer back to say, like, I'm not alone, right? Like other women have gone through this and like, I don't have to suffer. Like I can still go out there. I have dreams of big swims I still want to do. And it kind of was feeling like, oh, man, like I lost my motivation. Like 6 months ago, I did a big swim and I finished this big swim and I'm like, I'm done. I'm going to retire. I don't want to do this anymore. And kind of reading one of the later chapters, like it's normal to like lose my mojo, right? Like I was like, oh, there was, I can't remember the name of the chapter, but it was like being mentally tough. And I'm like, I'm mentally tough. Like I'm the like strongest mentally tough person I know. I don't need to read this chapter. And I was like 2 paragraphs in and I'm like sobbing. And I'm like, okay, I need to read this chapter. So, you know, that just having those tools, and I know you said you don't want to do an advertisement, but like truly just finding a resource. And you know, I was inspired by the book and just feeling empowered once I finished it. But I wrote this blog and it just the response from other women. I just got an email last night from someone and she was like, I'm 44. She's like, I don't have medically induced menopause, but I'm going through it now. And your struggles are exactly the same as mine. Thank you. And that kind of, you know, like if I can have a voice out there and say like, hey, this is happening to me. You're not alone. Because I felt so alone for the last 2 years. And just finding a community of people that like, I'm not alone. I'm not abnormal. You know, maybe it's a little early, but not that early.
Right.
It's been amazing. Just put it at that.
No, thank you. I mean, that's so great to hear. And it's not, yes, I have a hand in Next Level, obviously, but just just hearing like the impact that you too are like, I believe in paying it forward, and like that you're
Yeah.
finding this community and everybody's helping each other is incredibly moving. And, I do think, as a swimmer, like if I even beyond anything else, I'd be like, you should lift some weights. I mean, I would
Yes.
probably be telling you should probably lift
Yeah.
some weights.
Yes.
And I think no matter what happens with the bone scan, I'm gonna tell you to like
Yeah.
to lift some
Probably
weights.
should lift weights. We
Yeah.
lifted a lot in college and I hated it. So I've got some just like PTSD from like college weightlifting, but just I'm sold. Like I'm
You
convinced.
might
Like I
like it
kind of,
now. Find
yeah,
your
like
friends. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'm definitely gonna give it a shot for sure. The gym is intimidating though. I'm not gonna lie. Like the big, burly men, and so finding the courage to just like carve out my own space when I go to the gym, I think will probably be the biggest hurdle. But I am like committed to like making that happen and figuring out how to make this work for me, because I just I see the benefits. I see my female friends who lift, and we got to do it.
Yeah. And I hear that. I don't know how many options you have. There are gyms that are not filled like that, that are less, because there's
Yeah,
a lot of women in the weight room now, I guess is what I'm
yeah,
trying to
that's
say,
fair. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fair.
so if
Yes,
you can like get in there and own your space, you're
yes,
gonna be in good shape. But no,
yeah,
that's really great to hear. And I hadn't known from my background in you that you had found this other oncologist, which is also so wonderful to hear that
yeah,
you have found
yeah,
somebody who is working with you, which is
yeah,
so, so great. I mean,
yes.
it is, I mean, it's lonely. It can be a lonely space when you're 50, and it's sort of an
Hmm.
expected time. I
Right,
can only imagine, what it feels like 10 years prior. And like you're saying, it's not
right,
like super, super early, especially given the
right,
history, but it's still, I mean, it still is an isolating situation. So I'm
right,
really glad that you have
right.
found this community as well.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too.
So you sort of like very, very offhandedly talked about the big swim. You just did,
Yeah.
but I'm just like, I think it was bigger than you can just sort of toss that out there.
Yeah,
So there's two. There's another one that I'd wanted to ask you about that I think you did like a year after you completed your treatments, like
yeah,
because you had talked
yeah,
about the English Channel when we first started talking, that you were
yeah.
like, I think I could go back, and it sounds like you did go back and
I
do.
did go back.
Yeah. So what did you do
Yeah.
there?
Yeah. So it was almost exactly a year after my treatments ended for cancer. I went back to the English Channel and I swam it 4 times consecutively. So I swam from England to France, back to England, back to France, and then back to England without stopping. So in history, 4 other people had done it 3 times. So England to France, back to France. Um, so 4 people had done that, 2 women and 2 men. So, in doing it 3 times, I was the 5th person to do that. And no one had ever turned and headed back to England. So it was this kind of huge dream. I had been, the way the English Channel works, you have to book a slot years in advance.
I was gonna ask
Um,
that.
yeah. So I had this swim booked kind of before I even did Lake Champlain. And so it was on the agenda. It was booked. It was, I was committed to doing it. Then I get this cancer diagnosis. And I remember kind of once you get over the like, am I gonna die questions, I started asking my doctors, like, am I gonna be able to swim 80 miles again? And they look at you really funny when you ask that question, because they don't know, right? Like, especially my surgeon, like, he's like, I don't know the functionality of a breast implant and what that is going to do to your swimming. I mean, he was honest. He's like, I don't know.
Does it
And
feel
so,
different?
oh yeah. So I only did a one-sided mastectomy so that I
Hmm.
wasn't going to mess with my pec muscle on my left side.
Hmm.
But my implant is underneath my pec muscle.
Oh
And
yeah.
so, like, swimming is very pec oriented, right? And so I have a little bit of like mobility issues in my shoulder from my implant. And so, spent a lot of time with PT in the year after all my surgeries to like try and get my range of motion back and like rebuild strength. I still have, pain and discomfort, it's kind of ongoing, but really I've managed to work through it and kind of deal with it. But yeah, especially 1 year later, it's much better now than it was a year after treatment.
When you
Um,
swam 80
yeah,
miles
yeah,
back
when
and
I
forth
swam 80
across the
miles in the
English.
English Channel. So like I still had my tissue expander in when I did that, which yeah, people who have had a tissue expander are going to be like, what the hell, woman? So I did. I still have my tissue expander in. We delayed surgery. We kind of built a lot of my treatment around this English Channel swim, because I was like, I wanted to do it. I remember my boat captain for the English Channel. They take a deposit when you first book it, and then they ask you for half a year out. And so, he's followed me on social media. He knew what was going on, and he sent me this really nice email. And he was like, I hate to ask you this, but like, are you still coming? And I emailed him right back, like, I am coming. And so, it was hard, that year, kind of between treatment and getting to the English Channel was a struggle, like I am not as strong as I was. I'm relearning how to swim in a lot of ways. Like I am not hitting my times in the pool, like it was just frustrating. But at some point in the summer, and I'm in minimal training, I'm like, Sarah, you're doing your best, and that is good enough. And kind of from that moment on, like kind of just, you're like, hey, maybe I am never going to be as good as I was, but I'm still good enough. And kind of that mentality, that mindset kind of saved me through the last couple of months of my training. I'm in the English Channel. People ask me, like, did you know that you were going to be able to do it? And like, I wouldn't have started if I didn't think that I could do it. But just, I was kind of at peace with it. Like, I feel like I feel like I'm good. I know that I did my best, and I'm going to walk into this water and I'm going to enjoy it. And I'm going to fight for every single inch of this channel. And I did. My last lap was 17 hours. The first 3 were like kind of in the 11, 12-hour range. And we hit really crazy currents on the last lap. And I just remember, like, I'm in the middle of the channel and like the sun's coming up and I can see England. And I'm
Oh my
like, we
God.
are off course. And I'm asking my team, like, how much farther, like, I knew we should have been there, like, I know it's been 12,
Hours
13
ago.
hours. Why are we not there? And they're like, just go, and like sprint, get through these currents. Like it was crazy. And it was like, I am not getting out of this water until I make it back to England. I have not come this far to not make it. And so it was crazy. I crawled out on the beach, like it's steep, rocky beach, and I'm like crawling. And there's a crowd of people, and I just remember like looking back, like, what just happened? And it was crazy. I think it probably took 2 years for like that moment to like even sink in for me as to like what I actually accomplished, because it was so huge, with the backdrop of surviving cancer and just, life. It was pretty crazy.
I'm not rarely, I don't usually have a lack of words, but I am just there's so much about talking to you that has left me kind of awestruck and dumbstruck. I talk to a lot, Sarah, I talk to a lot of people, and I talk
Yeah.
to a lot of high level athletes, and many, if not, like you can usually tell when they have done things, like they carry a level of some little bit of self-importance or something about them. You know that, but
Mm-hmm.
like you have like none of that. Like you wouldn't know that. Like you're talking, I'm like, nobody in the world has done this, and you're just so unassuming about it. It's kind of blowing my mind.
Yeah.
It's just it's amazing. I mean, it's really
Yeah.
amazing. I like,
Thank you.
so it's true. It's just I'm literally, I'm just kind of blown away by this conversation. And just to just to continue this mind-blowing episode for me, like,
Mm-hmm.
so talk about the last one you did, which was, I don't know what the North Channel is, so pardon my
Yeah.
ignorance, but you were also the
Yes.
first person in history to complete a two-way crossing of the North Channel.
Yes.
And I know that there were giant jellyfish because I saw that
Yes.
on your
There
Instagram.
was huge jellyfish. Yeah.
So what is the North Channel, and
Yeah.
when and what did you do there?
Yeah. So the North Channel is the body of water between Northern Ireland and Scotland.
Okay.
It's so in the swimming world, there's a challenge called the Ocean's 7, kind of modeled after the 7 highest summits or whatever it's called in mountaineering. So there's these 7 channel swims that people try to do. I have never really been chasing that challenge, but I had the opportunity to do the North Channel, and it was on that list. One of my good friends was the first American to ever do that swim back in 2012, 2013, somewhere in there. And he came home with like these horror stories of the jellyfish. And so I'm like, I'm never going to the North Channel. But kind of just slowly over the years, like, okay, I knew I was going to have to go to the North Channel at some point. It's really cold. So the water is like 51, 52, 53 degrees at the warmest.
You are wetsuiting?
Yeah, I'm not in a wetsuit. So
oh my God.
Regular
I can't, like that
swimming.
alone.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah. And so like I've been terrified of this channel for years. And so kind of almost begrudgingly was like, okay, I'm going to go do the North Channel. I'm just going to get it done so I don't ever have to think about it again. And then I get there, I get to Northern Ireland, and it's just beautiful. The water's beautiful. The people are beautiful. Like just, it's a very wonderful, like magical part of the world. And the weather was terrible. And so we're waiting for the weather to clear. And so I'm getting in the water like every day. And I'm like, I think maybe I could like go there and back. I didn't really train for that, but like, I think I could do it. No one's ever done it. People have tried. I'm like, I think maybe I want to give it a shot. And so we did. We started, usually you start in Ireland and swim over to Scotland, but we started in Scotland, swam to Ireland, and then back to Scotland. The way over from Scotland to Ireland was like great, nice conditions. I only got stung a couple of times by jellyfish. The waves were kind of rough. So when it's like rougher, the jellyfish go down. Okay. On the way back, it was dead flat. And so all the jellyfish came up. And so we were about like halfway through on the way back, and I'm just getting nailed by these gigantic, I mean, I can't even tell you how big they are. Lion's mane's jellyfish. Some of them were so large, like all I could see were like their tentacles, right? The water is like really clear, but I can't see where this jellyfish is starting and where it's ending. All I can see is I'm swimming over a bed of tentacles.
Oh my God.
And then there's other stingy things, not just the lion's mane. So there's a whole bunch of different kinds of jellyfish. And so you're just nailing.
And you're not freaking out?
Well, it was one of those things like, I hate jellyfish. Like I am more terrified of jellyfish than I am of sharks. But I did my freak out ahead of time because I knew they were going to be there, right? I'd heard the stories. I knew the horror stories. I had done what I could to mitigate them. Like, and you're in the moment, right? And so in the moment, like, this is just what's happening to me.
What does it feel like? I mean, your skin must be pretty cold, right?
Yeah.
So like, what does it feel like when you're getting stung?
It feels, the best way is like a jolt of electricity, but then it like burns. I don't know, when I finally finished, it took me 22 hours. So 22 hours in 52-degree water. I'm getting stung by jellyfish. I get out, I'm on the boat, and they kind of like soaped me down. So that kind of helped alleviate some of the
They didn't pee on you?
No.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You don't do that.
I'm kind of glad. There's a lot of people, and that would have been really concerning if they were like peeing all over my face and my arms. But so we're on the boat right back, and I'm kind of like wrapped up in my parka with my hat and my gloves on, and I'm shaking, and I'm like, I think I'm shaking because I'm cold. I think there's like, I think this was from the jellyfish. And then someone on the boat were like, hey, are your jellyfish stings sweating yet? And I was like, that's what's happening. And so like I pulled up my sleeve, and I was like, you could just see like the lash marks on my arm, and I'm just oozing, and they call it sweating. And so these stings are just like oozing, and it looks like I'm sweating. So there's like little beads of sweat just like dripping off of my arms. And it was probably a solid 6 to 8 hours of that, like just burning, painful torture until it finally just kind of slowly went away. Yeah. Wow. But it was not pleasant. Let me tell you.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if it also would like jack up your adrenaline. Like, I mean, I'm a little sensitive to bees, so like I
Yeah.
blow up where it's a very localized reaction. But if
Yep.
I get stung enough, I start freaking the hell out. Like it's
Yeah.
just this adrenaline, like it's
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
And that was, I'd been stung by jellyfish a couple of times before, like in the English Channel, there's jellyfish, but I'd never been stung by lion's mane. And you don't really know like what your allergic reaction is going to be to
Right.
that particular species of
Right.
jellyfish.
Right.
So we didn't really know we knew I was going to get stung and we didn't know how I was going to react. I've heard horror stories of people like being airlifted out of the middle of that channel with like collapsed lungs and, spending, days in the ICU in the hospital because they reacted poorly to the jellyfish stings.
Poorly.
So like, like that could happen, right? So, I think we were all like super nervous. Like, am I going to get airlifted out of here after spending 2 days or, 2 ways in the English Channel or the North Channel? So I was lucky in that aspect that it wasn't really, I was not having any type of like an allergic reaction to them because people do.
So it seems.
Yeah.
So, you have a two final questions. I could talk to you all day. But I guess the internal question that everyone asks is like, what is next? Do you have something lined up in the near future for your swimming? And then I want to talk about the book you have coming out. So
Yeah, sure.
let's talk about the first one. Do you have something
Okay.
lined up next?
Nothing too crazy. I have 2 more swims left on that Ocean Sevens challenge. So one of them is the Tsugaru Strait, which is between 2 islands in Japan.
Okay.
So I am going to Japan in July.
Oh, sweet.
So it should be super fun. It's not a super long swim. I'm doing it with a friend, so there will be no doubling or anything. It'll just be like just a straight swim. The currents there are kind of crazy, so it could be a 7-hour swim. It could be a 14-hour swim. We'll find out. But there's wildlife there. There's jellyfish, but nothing too super duper crazy. But I've wanted to do this swim for years and years, unlike the North Channel where I've been putting it off. So I'm very excited to go to Japan and
Oh, that's cool.
Get number 6 done, and then hopefully number 7. The last one remaining is the Strait of Gibraltar.
Oh, wow.
So that will be the last one, and hopefully I can do that one next year. So then I'll have the Ocean 7 done. So that's kind of what's immediately pending.
Oh, that's really cool. Do you often see very cool wildlife when you swim?
Yeah, some swims there's like nothing. There's not a whole lot in the English Channel other than like jellyfish and trash and big cargo ships. But like I swam the Cook Strait, which is between the North and South Islands of New Zealand. And like this huge, gigantic pod of dolphins came and swam.
Oh, wow.
And it was like the coolest thing. That was the Cook Strait was actually my very first swim after cancer treatment. It was like 6 months after radiation ended, and it was also planned, and I kind of used it as like a let's get back into it kind of a swim. And it was rough, like the conditions were terrible, and I was like really miserable. And then these dolphins just appeared, and I was like, "Thanks, friends, you saved me." So
awesome.
Stuff like that happens. A lot of stuff is at nighttime, and so you don't always get to see the cool stuff. I did a swim in Hawaii. It was mostly overnight, and then the sun came up, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm like in an aquarium right now.
Yeah, I've done. I did Kona,
cool
and
stuff.
It's amazing the stuff you see. That's very cool.
Yes, for sure.
And then you have a memoir coming out. When is that coming out? It's called The Afterdrop, because coming back to life hurts. And I love that title. Can you talk about what that title means for those people who may not know?
Yeah, definitely a swimming term. But when you swim in cold water, which I do frequently, and you kind of push your limit a little bit, you get out of the water and you kind of think that you're fine. And then a couple of minutes after being out of the water, when you're in the cold water, all your blood is going to your heart, right, to keep you like alive and not hypothermic. And then you get out, and it kind of your body relaxes, and all that blood rushes to your extremities, and that's when you start shivering. And so that is called the afterdrop. And so like when you're getting out of cold water, there's always the rush to like get your warm clothes on really quick before the afterdrop hits. So there's definitely a lot of imagery about kind of pushing your limits and then suffering through the afterdrop and then coming back even stronger and better than before.
That is the story of the book, I'm imagining.
Yes, exactly. And so still working on it. My first draft is very solidly done, but hopefully it will be out this year. I was hoping for earlier this year, but life gets in the
I know
way.
the book Writing Life. You don't have to explain to me.
Yep. So, and I want it to be good. I know lots of my followers are really looking forward to it, and I want to make sure it's great for everyone who reads it, and that I'm getting, the message across of, life can be really, really hard and things are unexpected, but man, there's still some beautiful adventures to be had out there too.
I love that. And I guess, is there anything that we haven't said that you would like to relay to a woman who might be facing the same circumstances that, you've gone through?
Just talk about it. I just feel like so many of women's issues are just not vocally spoken about. And I think our sisters, our mothers, our husbands, our brothers, like everyone needs to know and to be able to have that opportunity to support you and advocate for yourself. You would think with all of the cancer stuff I've been through, I would be really good at advocating, but apparently I still have lessons to learn on that. So, just talk about it, advocate for yourself. Don't just suffer. There's options. You have options. Please take advantage of your options.
Well, that's our show. Join me next week when I sit down with movement pioneer Jill Miller, creator of Tune Up Fitness and author of Body by Breath. We talk a lot about breath work for stress reduction and how to help with menopause symptoms, but most of us don't really know what breathwork means, and importantly, what might be preventing us from breathing in ways that benefit us most in the first place. So come on back for that one. And until then, as always, stay feisty. You've been listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I'm your host, Celine Yeager. The show is edited and produced by the strong, talented, and amazing women at Live Feisty Media. Follow us on social media at Feisty Menopause, and please help us spread the word. Screenshot and share this episode on your social media channels with the tag @FeistyMenopause. Share the show with your friends, and please subscribe, like, review, and rate this show wherever you get your podcasts. Word of mouth and good reviews make it easier for other listeners to find. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay feisty.